Final score at Celtic Park, Celtic 3, Hearts 0, and Celtic take a massive step closer to what would be a fourth successive Scottish Premiership title. This is the final whistle show, just a solo show tonight here on a Sunday. What could possibly go wrong? Just myself for this one. If you are joining us here in the live, big thank you and big welcome. We've got Tommy55 and Billy Grant, new members to the channel. Remember, you do need to be a member to comment on these live pre- and post-match shows. There's a link to do all of that in the show notes. But welcome to Tommy, welcome to Billy, and to everyone else joining us here on the live. An interesting day at Celtic Park, very important that we bounced back from that nonsense defeat by Rangers a couple of weeks ago, primarily with a result, first and foremost, but also performance. And I think to a huge extent, Celtic got that. The big talking points pre-match, of course, were the fact that Kasper Schmeichel was going to miss this one through injury. And it still remains a wee bit unclear, actually, how long he's going to be out. Certainly a couple of weeks. And when Brendan Rodgers was pushed on it in the press match on Friday, I think it was, whether it was a season-ending injury, he simply said he didn't know, waiting to hear the results of scans and things of that nature. So in the meantime, Viljami Sinisalo gets his first league start for Celtic. And I thought, all in all, he done pretty well. We'll get to that just shortly. The other talking point is that Mike Nawrocki kept his place after a decent showing. He certainly didn't do much wrong against Rangers last time out. And really importantly, Callum McGregor came back into the fold. And I think at times it's easy to underestimate or even forget how important Callum McGregor is to this Celtic side. I think he showed all of that and then some during that game yesterday, particularly in the first half. He just took control, set the tempo throughout, and it was really great to see. Early comment from Sean. Sean, not the likes I told you so, Sean, but Sean's telling me so that he predicted 3-0, and he's absolutely right. He nailed that one. I think Joe from our show called the scoreline correct as well in the pre-match that we done. I called 4-0. There was a couple of 5-0s and 5-1s. But as I say, the most important thing, absolutely, was getting the result on the day, and that's exactly what happened. I'll go through the starting lineup. Most will know how we set up, but Sinisalo in goals, back four of Johnson, Carter Vickers, Mike Nawrocki, and Jeffrey Schlupp. Midfield three, arguably Celtic's best three, Callum McGregor, Arne Engels, Rio Hatate, and then up top, Kuhn, Maeda, and Jota. My prediction was that Maeda would come back in. I thought that he might have reverted back to Daizen Maeda on the wing, where he's been really effective for the most part this season and for most of his Celtic career, but he absolutely does a job through the middle. We'll get to Daizen just shortly, and again, we find ourselves spending just more and more time talking about this guy, given the season he's had. So Maeda, despite his winner for Ireland against Bulgaria around about this time last week, finds himself on the bench once again. Mike Nawrocki's an interesting one. So the manager was speaking yesterday. I don't know if these comments were pre or post match, but he basically said with Liam Scales missing and Austin Trusty out, that absolutely was the move. And Nawrocki, as I say, done pretty well against Rangers. But the manager said he does prefer a left-sided player, in that position. And that simply means with Carter Vickers being your right-sided option, that there is no real future at Celtic for Mike Nawrocki. And that's just the reality. He's done well these last two games, and he should take great credit for that. And Brendan Rodgers spoke about how good a pro he is. He doesn't play a lot. He's not had a lot of minutes at all in a Celtic shirt in the, year and a half plus that he's been here. But by all accounts, a really good professional, a really hard worker up at Lennoxtown, just gets his head down and isn't a disruptive influence in any way, shape or form. And real credit to him for that. But I just think moving forward, he's not going to be the option. He's not anywhere close to the levels of Carter Vickers, and we can debate Carter Vickers and whether he needs competition or potentially upgraded. That's a different chat for a different day. But it won't be Mike Nawrocki. He is not better than Cameron Carter Vickers. When Austin Trusty and Liam Scales are back fully fit and available, he doesn't slot in there. That's just the reality, and it's the cutthroat nature of being at Celtic. He will feel, and I'm sure if he's speaking to friends, family, his agent, he'll say, what else can I do? There's possibly nothing else he can do. All he can do is give his best, which is what he's done, and credit to him, but I don't think there's a future. But that aside, decent again yesterday, decent against Rangers, and well done to him for that. In terms of the Callum McGregor factor, yeah, we've debated it as well. I've asked the very question on our weekly show at times, should we rest the captain more? Are we more fluid without Callum McGregor? And so on and so forth. Yesterday puts that all in the bin because it's a tough game. You're up against a side, I wouldn't say banging form, but in decent form. I think Hearts had only lost 2 in 16, something like that, coming into the game. And Callum McGregor absolutely dictated the tempo. He gets the assist for the first goal, which we'll get to just shortly, but just everything flows through him. And he's very clever. He's the first guy that goes showing for it as soon as the goalie gets it, or as soon as Carter Vickers or Nawrocki gets it. He goes and drops to take them out of pressure and to take on the responsibility. We didn't see that so much. In fact, I don't know if we've seen it at all from Arnie Engels against Rangers a couple of weeks ago. And that itself is no huge criticism of Engels. I think it's a hard job to do, and it's not a role he's played a lot of, if at all, at Celtic. He's maybe dropped in there a couple of times later in the game. He did play that position for Augsburg before coming here, but it's a very different task to do that for Celtic. And I just thought Callum McGregor absolutely set the tone. But let's kick on to Daizen Maeda, because I joked last time I done one of these solo episodes, I joked that I was getting absolutely fed up with Daizen Maeda because I was running out of things to say, running out of headlines. Maeda Magic, Daizen Dazzles, all these kind of things. And lo and behold, we find ourselves here again. Just in terms of some of these numbers here. So 30 goals for the season. Daizen Maeda has scored 59 goals in total for Celtic, and now 30 of them are in this season alone. It's an incredible return, and it looks like it will just get better. We've still got a potential max of 9 games to go. There's every chance he blows that away. And I'll get to a record in a minute in terms of guys that have scored 40 goals for Celtic. We'll cover that one. And just in terms of 2025 alone, the stat is that he's got 16 goals and 7 assists. He is just absolutely on fire. And more importantly, I suppose, is the fact that he's loving life. You know, he's clearly a guy that's very confident in his football, very content in life. He's got a young family here, and we've seen them in the park a couple of times. And he just looks like he's in a really good position. And the manager was asked again post-match, as he was in the pre-match press conference, about the potential of a new deal. And it sounds like there's something afoot there. He has said that he's spoken to Dermot Desmond and the club about seeing if there's something that can be done. And at the moment, Daizen Maeda is tied up until summer of 2027, so there's no huge emergency as such. And if someone wanted to put an offer in this summer, they'd have to pay big money to get Maeda. But I also think there's a lot to be said for rewarding a guy first and foremost for everything he's bringing to the table, and also really securing that asset so that if someone did come calling, and I'm amazed that some big European sides haven't come calling, maybe they have, and we've not heard about it. But the fact that he does what he does, he's such a unique footballer. I think he would be very attractive to a lot of clubs around Europe at this moment in time. But if you do tie him up in a new deal, he gets rewarded financially, and the club get a huge payout if he does sign on. So it seems that there's talks ongoing about that at this moment in time. I'll cover his first goal first of all, and then I'll get to that stat about him potentially hitting 40 goals this season. Paul John at Axum put a tweet out earlier on today listing the various guys that have hit 40 goals for Celtic, and I believe there's only 8, so he'd be joining a very unique club, and we'll get to that in just a second. But the first goal, it's all about Callum McGregor first and foremost. He finds himself driving with the ball out of the midfield across the halfway line, and the whole thing opens out in front of him. Now, you see this fairly often at Celtic Park, but it's absolutely vital at that moment to find the right pass. And between Callum McGregor getting the right way to pass, Daizen Maeda making the right run, and then just the coolness to slot home. We've seen Daizen Maeda one-on-one quite a lot in the 4-ish seasons he's been at Celtic. And certainly in those early days, he would have a tendency to maybe snatch at chances or, I don't know, screw them past the post or over the bar or whatever. The moment he gets put through, now you're very confident that the end result is a goal for Celtic. And that's exactly what happened. He tucks it away beyond Craig Gordon, and he's delighted, as he always is when he gets his goals. Just on Craig Gordon, I don't know what is up with Craig Gordon. What is he now, 41, 42? And credit to him as a professional for getting back fit after I think it was a leg break a season or a season and a half or so ago. He's back as Hearts number 1. He's the Scotland number 1. But what is up with the moaning, particularly for Celtic's first 2 goals, up remonstrating with the referee? It's everybody's problem apart from him and his defence. I don't know what his big issue was, but both times, for both opening goal, the first and second goal, he's really up in Kevin Clancy's face, and I just don't understand. Just take your medicine, accept you've conceded a goal and kick on. And I don't know, it seemed a very strange approach, and for different reasons, Craig Gordon seems pretty unpopular with Celtic fans. I think we can all appreciate what he done for us. First time around under Brendan Rodgers, he was exceptional, part of the invincible team, but he seems to have a real bee in his bonnet. I don't know if he's ever forgiven us for Odsonne Edwards Panenka penalty that won Celtic the quadruple treble in December 2020, I think that was. So who knows? But Craig Gordon, very angry man at this moment in time, and he was certainly more so when Daizen Maeda got that first goal. So the start from Paul John that I mentioned, let me get it out here, and he says, only 8 players have scored 40 or more goals in a season for Celtic. Daizen Maeda scored his 30th on Saturday with a potential 9 games to go. So that would be the 7 league games and potentially 2 Scottish Cup games. Can Daizen hit the magical 40? Don't know if anyone in the comments want to have a quick guess at some of the names that have hit 40. But I'll run through them just here. I'll do it slowly if anyone wants to have a go. Jimmy McGregor, absolutely no doubt. Celtic and Britain's record goal scorer, just a phenomenon. Joe McBride, Bobby Lennox, Celtic's highest ever medal winner, 25 medals for Bobby Lennox. Kenny Dalglish, Charlie Nicholas, Brian McClare, Henrik Larsson and Lee Griffiths. Some huge names in there. And Daizen Maeda could add his name to that roster. As I mentioned there, he's got 16 goals since the turn of the year alone. So he's on track, certainly, to hit that target. And as I say, there's 9 games to go. So he'd need to be scoring 1 and a bit every game, something like that. But he's very capable, and it'll be really exciting to see if he does. So I'll just go to the comments. A couple of good comments coming in. So let me see if I can dig out some. Gypsy King joined us here, and good to see him. He's saying that Carter Vickers looked a bit slow the first 50 minutes. I think he was a bit sluggish, Gypsy King. He's not quite at himself at this moment in time. He had a fairly steady game overall. I thought the ref was really harsh in penalising him for what the ref deemed free kicks in that first half. And, the big heart striker was going down very, very easily. And I found it really frustrating. And actually, as an aside, I thought Kevin Clancy had a really poor game. I don't know what his leanings would be, and I don't think it really matters. I just think he's quite an inconsistent referee and a frustrating referee, constantly stopping play, slowing down play, fouls that weren't fouls, and so on and so forth. I just thought he had a really poor day, and a referee's job, by and large, is to kind of be anonymous, to let the game flow, and I don't really think Kevin Clancy made that happen on the day. Let me see. Tommy Dawson, good to see Tommy. I think Tommy met Willie Faulkner at the game yesterday. Wonder what he was saying, Tommy. You can let us know. But he says, an ideal centre-half would have the height of Nawrocki, the power and defending skills of Carter Vickers, the speed of Trusty, and the bravery of Liam Scales. Maybe so, but we don't have that combo at this moment in time. So that's a challenge to Paul Tisdale and Celtic's scouting team. Jim Hunter's here. Good to see Jim. He's saying, give him the money. I presume he means Daizen Maeda. I can't see us without him now. And absolutely, Jim. And there's always this debate, and it seems to be the case at Celtic, that your captain, Callum McGregor, is your highest earner, and that's almost like just a steadfast rule. I don't agree with it. If a guy on merit should get more, but he's not the captain, give him more. I don't think anyone would argue with Daizen Maeda being Celtic's top earner at this moment in time. He's so valuable to the team, and as Jim says, you just couldn't see the team without him at this moment in time. Couple of other comments. Yeah, absolutely. Brown Warriors nailed it with Lee Griffiths being one of those 40-goal plus scorers. Tommy Dawson's got Larsson and Griffiths. Spot on. Let me see. Yeah, and no more correct answers at this moment in time. But it's a real target for Daizen Maeda. I don't know if you've seen his press conference after the game. I think it was speaking to Celtic TV. He's quite a funny character. Doesn't say too much. His catchphrase has become that he is very happy, and that's what he goes with. But he also said, in decent English, that he'll score 3 goals next time around. So that's St Johnstone away next Sunday, 6th of April. So let's see if Daizen Maeda can do that. He also plays a huge part in the second goal of the day. He finds himself on the wrong side of Hearts defenders and flicks a header goalward. It beats Craig Gordon, but it comes back off the post. And Jota's doing what all good wingers should do. He's following up, and he smashes it into the net to make it 2-0 Celtic. Jota delighted, Craig Gordon fuming as per, but it's another assist for Maeda, and we're good to go at that point. And at that stage, Celtic had taken full control of the game. Paul Todd was in touch. Paul Todd's a friend in general and a friend of the show, and he messaged last night on Twitter saying that it was a game that Celtic controlled, and without being brilliant, we were clinical. And he's absolutely right. That's what wins you games of football. Celtic were in control during that first half. And yeah, we had a spell, for about 15 minutes where we took a bit of time to get to grips with things. But once we did, you then go and score those 3 goals. And it's 3 very decent goals from a Celtic point of view, and you're good to go. And it kind of makes the second half a bit of a formality, which we'll get to in just a moment in time. I should have mentioned, if I haven't already, that Sinisalo within that first 15 minutes makes a huge save, a really important save. There's a bit of a shamash in the box, a lot of bodies. but he gets down low to block a low shot, and he'll have taken a lot of confidence from that. I said this before, but as Celtic goalie, you can sometimes spend a lot of the game doing nothing. You're a spectator, but you've got to stay switched on, got to stay focused, because all of a sudden you could get called into action. And that could have been a very different game yesterday had Hearts scored, in those early exchanges. They also did have a massive chance from a header in the first half. It might have been 2-0 at the time, and the young fella's headed it by the post from about 6-7 yards. Could and should have probably done better. But Sinisalo's played his part to keep it nothing each at that moment in time, and Celtic do go on to capitalise. Just to get Tommy Dawson's story on Willie Faulkner, let me see. So Tommy says, I met Willie Faulkner at Tesco, asked him if he still goes along to the games. He says only the big games. He's doing some scouting for Fulham these days. He might be a good option for an interview for the channel. Maybe so, Tommy. I hope you got his digits for me. Send them on, and we'll give him a wee shout and see what's what. Just in terms of a couple of other points. So, as I say, Celtic, full control in the first half. We get that second goal through Jota. Of course, we get the third through Maeda. It is a tap-in at the back post as such, but there's a lot of work goes into that tap-in. Credit to Nicholas Kuhn, a guy under a bit of pressure, getting a bit of criticism. I've seen calls, get rid and move him on in summer, never rated him. Utter nonsense, because he's a really talented player. And this big suggestion that he's had his head turned, maybe so. That can affect a young player, a young winger. But he's a very good player for Celtic and has been, throughout the vast majority of this season alone. His numbers are really strong for the first part of the season. And yes, they've tailed off a bit, but people are forgetting he scored in the Allianz Arena against Bayern Munich just a number of weeks ago. He's a very talented player, and my hope is that he returns to form as we see out the rest of this campaign, and that we've got at least another season or so of Nicholas Kuhn before he decides to move on. That's the model for Celtic. We know that guys will stay for maybe 2.5 years, and if they're good enough, they'll kick on. I would love to see Nicholas Kuhn hang around for a bit more time. And I say that despite suggesting that he might have started on the bench yesterday. That's absolutely fine, and sometimes that's what's required to get the best out of guys. But I actually thought he had a decent game. I really did, and he showed real pace for the third goal to get to the byline, puts it across, Maeda taps it in, and you're absolutely good to go. I was having a wee debate on Twitter pre-match with a couple of folks after Celtic announced the team, and I'd made some comments on it and asked for any thoughts that people had. And someone made the point, and I understand it, that Celtic just had no youth on the bench, no options. So no Daniel Cummins, no Dane Murray, no Jude Bonner, who made his Celtic debut recently, and nobody else. The bench was made up of very experienced players. I'll read out the bench in just a second, actually. And that is a disappointment. Now, don't get me wrong, the first priority in a game like yesterday is win the game. Bringing young players through is an important part of Celtic, and it's something that we need to work harder at and get better at. But you can imagine, had Celtic put a couple of youth players on the bench and it's nothing each, and we throw on, say it as Daniel Cummins or whatever, he misses a big chance and Hearts get a draw, or Hearts steal the game 1-0. Where does the manager stand then? It's a real, you can see the quandary. I think Brendan Rodgers has proven in his career that he does like to give youth a chance, but it's such a fine balance. And whether it's a case of he doesn't rate the young players coming through highly enough at this moment in time, maybe they're not ready, or maybe he just thought he had to go really experienced yesterday. I don't know, but I can understand some people's concerns, if that's the right term, that Celtic don't have or any youth on the bench for such a fixture. The other player, just while I remember, who absolutely was on the bench, but we didn't see any of them, was Greg Taylor. And it looks like it is all but done for Greg Taylor at Celtic, sadly, because he's been such a good servant, such a good professional, such a dedicated professional. And he's a player that Brendan Rodgers is really fond of, and he spoke about him post-match. I think the indications are that the manager wanted him to stay, and whether then the club and or Greg Taylor's agent couldn't make the numbers work, it remains to be seen. But it looks like he's off. I think the manager's words were, it's more likely than not that he'll leave, and that'll be that, and he'll go with everyone's best wishes. But it's clear that he's now getting phased out. I don't think he didn't come on against Rangers, did he? That certainly didn't feature yesterday, and he's barely had any minutes in the last at least half dozen games or so. Jeffrey Schlupp's come on there and done a really good, really competent job. And whether we can make a deal for him happen or not remains to be seen. The manager was asked. Jeffrey Schlupp's 32 years of age. I thought he had a real steady game yesterday. He's a real powerful, physical player. I think he does a really good job there at left back, I have to say. But he's on good money at Crystal Palace, albeit that deal's about to expire, and it remains to be seen if Celtic can make something happen there as we head into the summer. Just a couple of other comments. Let me see. What have we got? Sean Booth says, I met Tommy Johnston on his wedding day. He was with Malcolm Mackay at a petrol station. Don't know if that's relevant at all to today's chat, Sean, but I appreciate the comments. If anyone else has met any players in any weird and wonderful situations, please do let us know. Colin Rogers says that he thought Nicholas could knuckle down and get stuck in well after an initial lackadaisical start. And I think that's pretty fair, Colin. I thought he really came into the game and done really well, so fair play to him. Yep, so we'll see. And please do let us know any more comments. We'll go on for another 10, 15 minutes or so, give or take. So please do let us know. So Callum McGregor, Greg Taylor, just finds himself, I think he's won 10 trophies for Celtic. He's been pretty much a mainstay since he came in. I think he came in 2019, but I think the writing's on the wall and he'll move on. And let us know your thoughts in the comments, whether Celtic should be doing more to keep him or if it's just a natural break for things and that it's potentially right that he now moves on. Getting into that second half, to be honest with you, there's nothing major to write home about. It wasn't a great day weather-wise at Celtic Park for anyone that isn't around Glasgow. It was real swirling wind and rain, kind of cold and shivery and all that kind of stuff. And the game is done and dusted at half-time. It's 3-0 with no real prospect of Hearts getting into it. Just there was no danger at all. And I think the second half played out, like a bit of a training exercise, if you want to call it that. And I suppose on that note, it's a real plus for Celtic that they're then able to reintroduce Paulo Bernardo. He's missed 6 weeks or so. I think the last time he played was the 8th of February, coincidentally. Sinisalo also played that day. It was against Wraith Rovers in the Scottish Cup. So he's been out for a reasonable spell there for a young player. And he done the press conference pre-match on Friday. And you could tell how keen he was to get back. So delighted that he comes back into the fray, as does James Forrest. He missed a fair bit of football, and it was great to see him coming back in. You'll know the start. Most will know the start. I think James Forrest has scored for 14 straight seasons in a Celtic shirt. He's now got 9 games to go, or a max of 9 games to go to make that 15. And there's a huge hope that James Forrest can do. So when he came on, as with Bernardo, I thought they were tidy. There was no great... drive by Celtic to really push for a fourth. As I say, I think they were just happy to see it out and keep it fairly comfortable, and that's the way it went. But James Forrest played his part in that. Paulo Bernardo the same. The other subs that came in, Daizen Maeda, Yang and Luke McCowan for Maeda, Kuhn and Hatate respectively. Bernardo had come in earlier for McGregor. Forrest came on for Jota. And I think Daizen Maeda, I mentioned him earlier on in the piece, I think it's a real false narrative that he's lazy. I think if anyone watches his cameo yesterday, there's a lot of hard work goes into it. I'd like to think and hope that he's learning from Daizen Maeda. Daizen Maeda is a phenomenon. He is so unique, and I'd say it's impossible to replicate exactly what he does given the energy levels he has. But you can certainly take a leaf out of his book in terms of just his general work rate. And I think there was real... a decent shift put in by Daizen Maeda. He was quite selfless, actually. For anyone who watched the game, you'll remember on a couple of occasions he's done really well to get on the end of some kind of fairly direct passes and get in behind the defence, but he's found himself out wide and could maybe have taken a shot which might have been a 50-50 in terms of how high a chance it would have been, but he's chosen to be selfless and try to square it and link up with different players, etc. And I think he seems a good teammate. I think he's working really hard. He may have thought that when Kyogo moved on, that was it. That was his big chance to go and take the number 9 slot for his own. But Daizen Maeda had other ideas. And I don't think Daizen Maeda's too frustrated by that. You'd want him to be frustrated to an extent. You want guys hungry and keen to play their part. But he made some comments after his international duty with Ireland last week that Brendan Rodgers has been brilliant for him. He's given him his love back for football. He's learning a lot, and he's having one of his best goal-scoring seasons. I think the stat is that he's got 14 goals, which is a pretty decent return. And people will say, well, it's not enough for 9 million. Daizen Maeda doesn't set the price tag. All he can do is go out there, do his very best, and continue to learn under the manager, and that's what he'll continue trying to do. Couple of other comments. Let me see. Jim Hunter says that there's no danger James Forrest will score at the Death Star. I'm not so sure. I think James Forrest has got more quality than people give him credit for, and I know he's not got a great record against Rangers. He scored a couple, I think, but not many. But I think there's a good chance that he will get something there if not elsewhere, to get that record. Let me see. Brown Warrior says, I don't mind the fact that Greg Taylor's leaving on a free. We've more than had our money's worth out of Taylor over the piece. Getting KT on the cheap and perhaps even Schlupp on a free to replace Greg Taylor and Alex Bailly. Yeah, I think Celtic are getting a pretty decent end of the deal. So no disagreements there. And let me see. Fred Williams says, yet again, CCV doesn't like being up against a big physical striker. I'm not quite sure that's the case, Fred. I think he's come up against plenty big target men, and he does pretty well. Celtic got a clean sheet yesterday, so I think he's done his job and then some. He did have that loose moment though in the second half where I think he was under a bit of pressure. All he had to do was knock it back to Sinisalo, and he put it a bit short, and the keeper's made a really decent stop. But all in all, I think Carter Vickers, deserves real credit, real praise for what he's done in a Celtic shirt. But I think, like Kuhn, for example, you could debate that he's off form, by his own high standards at this moment in time. So hopefully he can pick that up further on in. Anything else? Fred, again, thinks that Forrest might get a penalty before the end of the season. Watch this space. Here's hoping, but I don't know if Arne Engels would have something to say about that. I think he's pretty keen to make sure he remains the penalty taker. And Brown Warrior, just in defence of Adam Maeda, says if Maeda hits 20 goals this season, folks should lay off him. I think 20 would be a decent return, and I think there's a good chance that Adam Maeda gets that this season. But overall, just in terms of the game, as I say, nothing of huge note. Second half, no real incidents, not going to get into too much. Like McCowan come in, done okay. Yang done okay. I'm a fan of Yang, as most folks will know. But nothing really to get excited about across that second half. And Celtic see it out for the 3-0 win. It temporarily put us 16 points clear. Rangers got their win at Dundee after a bit of huffing and puffing, so it's back to 13 now with 7 games remaining. But regardless what Rangers are doing, Celtic are now just a few games potentially from the title, maybe even less. And as I say, we go to St Johnstone next time out. And the manager will be pleased with that because, as I say, the most important thing was to respond well to that Rangers result and performance and get the win, whatever that took. And you could argue, he spoke about the importance of starting early, getting off to a strong start. We done the opposite against Rangers. And you could debate that it was similar against Hearts. We found ourselves on the back foot rather than on the offensive. But over the piece, over the 93 minutes, Celtic absolutely showed the qualities that they've got and thoroughly deserved win, and there would be no debate in that. Let me see, what else have we got? Further comment from Jim. Jim says, I'd wish Taylor well if he leaves, however. He would point out that the grass isn't always greener, going by some of the players that have left us lately. That's an interesting one. A lot of folks have got the mindset that, once players leave Celtic, they're dead to me. I don't care what happens to them. They're no longer my concern and all that stuff. Kyogo's having a really poor time out at Rennes. Matt O'Reilly, I think he was sub not used for Brighton in the FA Cup yesterday. They get knocked out by Forest on penalties. Who else? There's a number of guys. And I wonder if Greg Taylor... players can get more money when they leave Celtic, but do they get the success, the adulation, the excitement, of being at a club like Celtic? I would say most don't. Henrik Larsson's maybe the one exception. He goes to Barca, Man United, eventually back to Helsingborgs, and hits heights that he couldn't reach at Celtic in terms of Champions League and Premier League with Man United, for example. But that's probably a bit of an outlier. Virgil van Dijk, he maybe joins that club as well. That aside, I'm not too sure. I think there's more that leave Celtic, and listen, I'm sure they have a good career beyond Celtic. That their bank balances are in a good place, but it might just not be the same. I think Gary Hooper's a guy that left Celtic too early, went for the money, messed about at Norwich, all these kind of things. And it might well be the case with Greg Taylor, for example. I would genuinely wish him all the best. I think most fans would. He also seems to be a popular teammate. But I don't think there's any doubt that maybe Greg Taylor's Champions League career is over. I don't think he goes to another Champions League side. He may go to a bottom quarter of the Premier League if he's fortunate. Maybe more likely to be the top end of the Championship. I think it's really interesting to see where a guy like Greg Taylor goes. But I don't buy into the theory that I don't care what happens to them. I want them to do well. If they've given their all for Celtic, I want these guys to do well. And it also paints a good picture for Celtic. So if these guys leave us and go on to be a success in England or anywhere else, then I think that bears well for future transfers, where people can say, well, he left Celtic and done really well, so maybe we can do the same with this guy. So it remains to be seen. But, I wish these guys all the best wherever they head off. But it does look like Greg Taylor is on the move. Not a huge deal to add to this one then, so we're kind of closing out. As I say, 13 points clear now, 7 remaining. Scottish Cup's a different story, and we'll get to that. But there's 2 more league games in between. We've got St Johnstone away next week. We've then got Calmac at home the following week. Calmac who got hammered 5-1 by St Mirren yesterday, so they're really struggling. And to be honest with you, Celtic absolutely should be taking maximum points from those 2 games. And at that point, you could be on the cusp of the title depending on what happens elsewhere. But we're now just driving towards that. It's not an if for Celtic in terms of the title, it's a when, and what would be a 4th successive title and a very genuine 55. I don't know what kind of clubs count their titles. It seems a weird thing to do, but if you want the number, Celtic would be going for a 55th title, and hopefully we're not too far away from that. In terms of what we've got coming up at the Celtic Exchange this week, so we've got the weekly show tomorrow, Monday night. And just a reminder that goes out on a Monday to Celtic Exchange Plus subscribers before general release to everyone else on a Tuesday. If you're interested in the Celtic Exchange Plus, there's a link to get involved in the show notes for this episode. You get advance access to that show on a Monday night. You get ad-free listening for every episode we do. And you're automatically entered into a draw for a variety of different Celtic prizes we offer every month. This month we're offering the Celtic jersey, which is just the phenomenal, incredible book by Paul John Dykes, charting the history of the hoops from the very start of Celtic right through to where we are today. It's a really stunning book, and we're looking forward to gifting that to this month's lucky winner. To be in a chance of winning that one, you need to sign up by midnight tomorrow, 31st of March, and we'll then do the draw some point in the early part of next week. That aside, we're continuing with our CSC story. So that's where primarily myself, and I've also been joined by Paddy recently, speak to a number of different Celtic supporters clubs across the globe. Been speaking to a lot of clubs in the US recently. I spoke to the guys in Pittsburgh this time last week, and that episode went out on Wednesday. Paddy's spoken to the guys in the Manhattan CSC. That'll go out this week. I'm speaking tonight to guys from LA. We're speaking beyond that to guys in Boston and Philly and Dubai. There's a whole lot of things coming up. Excuse me. And it's always really interesting to hear the Celtic story from folks who are in the various corners of the globe, how they came to support the club, how did they do so from afar, what it's like on match day, and what their hopes and aspirations are for their clubs in the future. So be sure to tune into those ones. As I say, I'm speaking to the guys in LA shortly after this recording tonight, and those episodes will be out over the next couple of weeks. That aside, just a huge thanks to everyone who's joined us here on the live. Thanks for the various comments, and they've been a big help to me. These solo shows can be a wee bit tricky at times, but the comments are a big help in keeping the show ticking along, so we really appreciate that. As I say, next up, it's the weekly show. We're recording that tomorrow, Monday, and that will be out tomorrow night for all subscribers. Be sure to check out the link in the show notes to see how you can get early access to that and those various other benefits of Celtic Exchange Plus membership. But that aside, have a brilliant Sunday night, folks. Thanks for joining us here. We'll see you again really soon.